Hi traders and welcome to the Technical Analysis Market Wrap on Friday the 29th of October. So it's a very late one today because we've been basically wiped out with power outages and internet outages all day because of a big storm that hit Melbourne. So we've finally been able to get a little bit of internet up to actually see some live charts. So hopefully we'll be able to see if we've got any moves happening into New York tonight and early into next week. All right, we'll jump into the Aussie USD on the daily first, and we can see here on a daily chart the price is finally touching the 200 moving average. It's been promising to do so for the last couple of days, and you can see here that it's found a little bit of resistance right at the point where we would expect it. Now, look, it may find a little bit more of a move up into the 50 or the 75.80 area. Really, you can see that it's only just above the 200. That is not going to be unexpected if it does actually push up one more time and try to get to that level. It is only a handful of pips higher, but the 200 may well hold it. It is a very solid moving average for a daily chart. So we can see a little bit of resistance. The stochastic has kind of come down a little bit and starting to push up again, which leads me to believe that it might still have a little bit more power. But I think to be watching this one really closely, you've got to go to the smaller time frames, down to probably the 1 hour. Look for any changes of trend around this zone here. So at the moment, you can see it's really trudging its way up. If it starts to reverse down a little bit now and we see a lower high and lower low on the 1 hour, I'll start to believe the story. It's got a lot of work to do to actually get past this mess. I think it needs to get a little bit more force behind it. You can see we're starting to consolidate here on the 4 hour as well. And the 20 on the 4 hour has been a very, very solid base for it. You can see here that it's hardly really breached it at all on the way down, but it has found support all the way up. So for mine, yeah, before we start shorting the Aussie again, it needs to get past these moving averages on the 4 hour. I'd like to see a breakdown, probably below, at least it's below this level here. This worries me a lot. So I'd want to be seeing probably a 74.80 break. If we see that, then we're going to have a lightning bolt on the 1 hour for sure, and that'll start to tell the story that we're probably going to find that resistance at the 200 to hold up, and we'll start looking for the shorts from that point onwards. Now, same deal goes if it happens to break up past this level here and makes a new high and closes above there on a 1 hour chart. Even a 1 hour would do the job. I'd be probably trading that into that 75.80 area that we talked about. That is a very strong resistance and roll reversal zone for it. You can see here it was a very strong support, resistance, and we would expect it would be resistance again. So two ways to play this one. If it breaks to the high and closes above 1 hour, we can scalp it to the 75.80, and if it goes down below the 74.80, we can take it down, basically down to at least the 74.50. They're both about 30 or 40 pip scalps on this one. So very scalpy, but that's okay. That's what it's giving us, and that's what we're looking at trading. I'm not really biased either way. I'm happy to take either, and I think they're about the same distance anyway, so no real harm to go on either direction on that one. All right, we'll move over to the US Dollar Cad. This one, like we said last week, looks like it's found its base around this level here. The 123.50 to 123 area has been fairly strong. It's been strong for a long time with a lot of history behind it. It's still very uncertain about what it wants to do. All we know that it is at support, and in order to take it short, it's going to have to definitely break down here on a daily chart. I wouldn't be taking anything less than a daily break of this level. If it does that, then we could start looking to the lows again at around that 120, 121. But realistically, it's got a little bit to do before it actually makes that happen. Once again, this candle, I know it was obviously a news-related event, but it does concern me a little bit that it had a really big crack either way and didn't finish anywhere. That doesn't, even though it has its support, it doesn't fill me with confidence for the long or the short, really. So for me, the market has to play out now. It's got to get that series of higher highs and higher lows. Because it's been a very sustained move down, I would want to see this actually happen on at least a 4 hour chart. So I'd want to be seeing a 4 hour change of trend, and you can see it's very flatliney at this point in time. So what we want to be seeing is a break definitely higher than the moving averages in the very first instance, and then a series of higher highs and higher lows. If we get that, then I'm convinced that it can probably start to move up to these levels here around that 125, 80 zone again. So look, there's good moves in the CAD. I think this is a bit more than a scalp. This is pretty much a swing trade, really. So you're going to get your 150 to 200 pips on both moves, really. Same deal goes on the bottom. If we get a break below these levels here on the 4 hour, and we get a series of lower highs and lower lows, then we know we've got a pretty easy target to go for at around that 121 in the first instance. Not bad trading on the CAD, but again, it's a little bit of a watch and see. If you want to really get into a scalp and see and maybe take it for a really short-term move, you got to go all the way down to a 15-minute chart. You can still see it's flatlining here, but we could take a move down potentially here to the lows of around 123 or the highs of about 124.20. Absolute scalps, right? They're only 20 or 30 pips. So you've got to trade them with caution. But if you get the lightning bolts, look, lightning bolts don't generally mislead you in the smaller time frames, especially when there is a good support and resistance zone to trade in between. It is smack bang in the center of both of those resistance and support zones. So, yeah, you can definitely aim for either of them on a scalp. But again, you've just got to wait for that lightning bolt, and that could come, that could come in the next couple of hours. So certainly one to watch, but we're waiting for it to kind of, I think it's going to probably consolidate around the 123 and maybe start to push up. That's probably my gut feel, but I would take both trades either side. Whichever one breaks out is the one I'll be looking at taking. All right, we'll go over to the US dollar yen now. So this one here, we highlighted this a little while ago. Yeah, we saw rejection up at this level here. Came back down, tested it from above, tested that above resistance again, and sold off again. So real classic 101 trading there. Now it finds itself at that little mini support. What we want to see is either a move up to close above this 114.25 now, or a breakdown and close below the 20 moving average. It looks like there's a little bit of waiting this week, doesn't it? Like a late Friday, we're waiting for a lot of moves. But look, at the end of the day, anything that you're going to take that is not waiting for these moves is really taking a bit of a gamble on the direction. I would much rather wait for the direction to play out and actually tell us where the buyers and sellers want to take it, and then you join on that move. What I think it has got is two very clear targets, and I think I like the yen for that. And I think the 114.25, that's 55 pips away from where we are now. So it is a reasonable move up. You want to go to the smaller time frames if you want to trade that. But of course, the break of the 20 takes us all the way down back to the 112. So there is certainly more room to move on the bottom. But again, it really comes down to what it's doing on the smaller time frames. On the 4 hour, basically doing nothing, as you can see. But on the 1 hour, this is where the action's going to happen. So you can see the targets are very clearly defined here. If we start to see some clear higher highs and higher lows on a 1 hour chart, it's going to take a while to get in, of course. It's probably going to be, 113.80 or 90 by the time you do it, but it is basically a scalp. You're looking for about 30 or 40 pips, and you wouldn't want your stop loss any bigger than that, of course. So the preferred trade for me is probably the way down. Now, I think it's already tested the high and failed on it again. I would like to see it probably break below the 20, and then we start aiming for the 112 level. That would be my preferred trade, because I think there's more meat in that trade, and it would be just a little bit easier to trade. But if you want to scalp it to the long, there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you get the lightning bolt effect on the 1 hour. All right, we'll go over to the dollar index now. The important dollar index it broke this level of support that we did draw up. It's trading just below it at the moment. Like, you can see that it had a bit of a crack down. The 50 has pulled it up a little bit. I think tonight's trading is going to be very interesting for the dollar index, because this is the make or break time for it. If this level doesn't hold, you could see it really probably taking a bit of a bath and maybe getting back down to that low sort of 92 or even into the 91s again. That's how significant that move could be. So realistically, it's one of those ones where if it does push higher, if we get a daily close above the 93.50 area, that would be quite bullish for it. I think that means that roll reversal zone is probably going to hold up early into next week, which will establish some good trades on the Euro USD, of course, and a couple of the other dollar-based pairs. But I think it needs to actually close there in the next 12 hours of trading, right? So we really need to see this close above this level on a daily chart to be convinced that that strength is going to hold. Failing that, if we end up closing on the lows or even lower than the previous candle, which will be around that sort of 93.15 area, it doesn't bode well. Although there is a little bit of roll reversal that could potentially happen here, I wouldn't be totally trusting this area because the main one has failed. So yeah, that to me would be a very weak sign, and that would be very bullish, obviously, for the Euro USD. So we'll jump onto that. But in terms of what the dollar index is doing, we need to see a close above that 93.50 by tomorrow morning to be convinced that we're going to be strong into next week. If it goes lower, then I think it spells trouble for the dollar index. All right, we'll go over to the Euro USD. We'll go out to a daily first, of course. You can see that we've got, look, what is definitely a lightning bolt action happening here on the daily chart. It's pushed up. That coincides with dollar weakness, of course. It has hit the 50 moving average, and this is in a very similar zone to the dollar index in that, as we would expect. Obviously, it's at a roll reversal zone here. We've got support, and now we would expect that would be resistance. We've got the 50 moving average there as well. I'll draw a horizontal line to really mark out that level so you can see it properly. So, realistically, again, it's make or break time. Or this, it looks very strong on the MACD. I'm not going to lie. The histogram's trying to push up past the zero. That does generally, if you're looking at that in isolation, you'd say this is looking pretty good. And you know what? If it closes above that 116 sort of 90 area, it is good. So that's what we're looking for here. We're looking for a break above this level here. That will again coincide with the dollar index going short. So, and if it does that, I think it's probably good back up to the potentially 119 area, which is this zone here. The 119 was the last real level of resistance that we're going to find, and I think if it closes above these moving averages, it can certainly have a real crack at those. So we'll definitely keep an eye on this one. It's just one of those ones where, again, it's a little bit of a wait and see, but if we do get that close above it, I think we've got some very clear targets and there is a little bit of meat there. Failing that, if it does fail at this level and starts to short again on the smaller time frames, and we start to see a series of lower highs and lower lows, then we've got a very clear target to aim for, which is around that 115.50 area. So I do like the euro in the sense that it's got two trades both sides. The one you take is going to be obviously the one that makes the most amount of sense. You can see here that, it's pulled back off that level already. We know that it's already sold off that level. It doesn't mean that it won't reverse here. It's finding a little bit of support, potentially on the 200 moving average, and you've got the 20 and the 50 right in its face, and you've got this little bit of roll reversal zone here as well, which could potentially give it some support, and it may bounce off here and crack through. So definitely keep an eye on this one, but if we get a close above here on a daily early into next week, it looks like a fairly bullish week for it next week, and we'll probably be able to get involved in some of those longer term trends. All right, the last one we're going to have a look at today is the Aussie 200. I've got a lot of requests for this one today because of the big sell-off that we saw. You can see we've had a very, very big sell-off. No real big surprise that it did come off this level, because you can see this was a level of support previously. It was resistance here. This was the first time it sold off it after the big move up. Once it did break down here, it came back and retested it, then sold off again. So no real surprise to see that it did weaken from this level here. Look, it's one of those ones where I think if the S&P 500 continues to rise, this will probably turn around. But if the S&P sells off tonight and the Nasdaq starts to sell off a little bit, which it may well do, it might be due for a bit of a breather. If it does that, we'll see some continued sell-off in the futures tonight and maybe a weak start to Monday. So one to definitely keep an eye on. A very clear target, obviously, though. We've got the 7,200 right in the gun. That is a clear, very, very clear target for this. Where this candle closes is going to be very interesting. If this is a big red candle that looks similar to this or worse on Monday morning, the 7,200 is probably going to be a gravitational pull to it, and that's what I'd be certainly aiming for. Failing that, though, if it does reject quite heavily and pulls back right up and gives us a very big hammer type candle, and it's going to take a fair reversal. It'll take a best part of a 1% reversal, but it could do it, no question about that, especially if there's strength in the US tonight. If that happens, then we're going to be looking at breaking this high early into next week and then starting to push back up into the mid 75. So one to watch tonight. Keep an eye on the price action, but two very clear targets for it. 72, if we get a big dirty red candle like this closing tonight and opening like that on Monday, we've got a very clear target to go for early next week. But of course, if this reverses and the price action reverses right up to the top or very close to, gets into the top 20% again, we'll start looking higher and we'll start aiming for that 75.50, and that would probably happen and play out Monday or Tuesday of next week. So I think two good trades. We just have to see which one we're going to play out. So sorry for the late one tonight. I think it's probably helped us because we saw all the Aussie action today anyway. So it's given us a little bit more analysis to do. Have a great weekend, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.